Are video games losing their magic? Indie dev Maisie recently posted this tweet saying, playing video games as an adult is buying 30 plus video games a year to chase that feeling of playing the 1 or 2 you got per year as a child and never getting it. And this idea, alongside some thoughts spurred on by Pokemon Scarlet and Violet of all things, has both resonated with and haunted me since I read it. Have video games lost their magic? Or is it our wonder that's dissipated? And is it possible to recapture what was lost? Let's talk about it. Before we begin, I'd like to quickly mention that we're starting to do an eShop card giveaway alongside each of our video releases, at least for the time being. And there'll be more details about that at the end of the video, so stick around. So have video games lost their magic? Well, maybe before we can ascertain whether something was lost, we need to know what was there in the first place. I think a well we'll keep coming back to is the easy target of childlike wonder. But even though there's more to it than this, it's gotta be where we start. My first game was Pokemon Blue on the Game Boy when I was 7. Like a lot of kids, I didn't have a ton of money, so I didn't have many games. But then again, did I really need more than this? The world of Pokemon was so encompassing and vast that I lost myself in it. To this day, I remember multiple actual dreams of secret areas I found in the game, and it took me years to figure out if these were real parts of the game that I stumbled upon and couldn't find again, or actually a dream. I remember the first time I finally beat Agatha in the Elite Four, and as you walk through the door, the game auto-walks you down a hallway to Lance, and I hadn't healed my team at all, or saved, and I was terrified that I'd made it further than basically anyone before, and it was all gonna come crashing down. And then when I did beat Lance, and he wasn't the final boss, but your rival came after, and then when I finally beat him, man, I was a 7-year-old at the top of the world. I'd done what no one else could do, and I'd overcome every challenge to get there. But of course, I'm just one of 30 million kids that did the same thing, and certainly millions more over the years. However, as I reflect on this experience as a 30-year-old man with many more games under my belt, there's a lot to unpack. For one thing, when I'm nearing the end of most games, in the back of my head during the final boss fight is perpetually a checkbox of whether this actually is the final boss or the penultimate one with something else just around the corner. That card can only be played once or twice before you're savvy to it. And honestly, one of my favorite parts of the Scott Pilgrim vs. the World movie is a play on that exact trope. And unfortunately, this is something that's become a borderline expectation in most games, equal in some ways to what's the post-game. In Pokemon Blue, for me, the post-game of going to Celadon Cave and capturing Mewtwo with an Ultra Ball because I'd probably used my Master Ball on like a Primeape or something was a surreal experience. It felt fake that there would be more to do after I'd achieved ultimate Pokemon glory. But again, I was a kid who had no expectations, and now I'm an adult who has them. This, I believe, is the heart of the matter. Expectations. And it's not the bad kind of expectations like we may have for Nintendo Directs or what someone may do for us that's unrealistic, or I don't know, Christmas presents or whatever. It's just the regular kind. The kind that helps us live our lives and function as humans whose worlds are more complicated by the day. You expect drivers to obey the rules of the road. You expect your job to pay you for the work you do. And by golly goodness, you expect that after you beat the last Bowser fight in a Mario game, there will be some kind of challenge levels. It's just surprising in Super Mario 3D World just how many there are and how much it makes you do before you're allowed to tackle Champion's Road. In large part, expectations are learned behavior that help us predict and prepare for what's likely up ahead. I think back to the Rasputin video, Gaming for Non-Gamers, in which he explains that his wife obviously expected to be able to do certain things that the game just wouldn't allow. In games that railroad you or block off certain paths using means that don't really make sense in the actual world, as an adult who speaks the language of video games, I know not to bother to challenge this, and I can just chalk it up to game design. But an adult who doesn't play games much would think this odd because, well, if there's some trash right there blocking the path, can't I just walk around it? I know it's kind of gross, but I can squeeze through. This discrepancy of real-life expectations with game realities is neutral and mundane to many of us, disheartening perhaps to someone who's unfamiliar with the realities of most games, but to go back to childhood, the perspective wholly changes. As a 7-year-old, I was told what to do most of the time. If I did something wrong in a game, I would generally assume it wasn't an issue of messy game design or inconsistency with the real world, but rather I, and probably you, assumed those are just the rules and learned to abide by them. The camera in Mario 64 is super janky by modern standards, but the reason I still acclimate so quickly to it was believing thinking as a kid, essentially that it was right to be the way it was, and I would be wrong for thinking otherwise. These lessons set expectations upon which my understanding of the world of games has been built. But now, I'm not a 7-year-old kid in 1998, I'm a 30-year-old man who keeps getting older, and I'm often guilty of trying to recapture the magic that feels to have been lost. Or again, has it? There are games that are really well crafted, finely tuned adventures that technically check all of the boxes. A recent outing like Kirby and the Forgotten Lands comes to mind. It was a blast to play through and a joy to 100%. However, beside the format of Kirby games, it didn't challenge many expectations, it just did a really good job of meeting them. I've been wondering since I beat this game why it hasn't really stuck with me in the months to come as much as some others that I may have even liked less during their runtime. And in large part, it's because of this. With the exception of how tough the post-game final boss was, nothing was particularly surprising, just particularly good. But on the complete other end, without spoiling any of the game, the main gimmick of Undertale is succinct but powerful. This is a game that challenges expectations in a multitude of ways. RPG battles aren't many navigation, but minigames, which, by the way, I have a video I'm working on as well. Stay tuned for that one. There are a multitude of endings, and the way in which you'd approach most RPGs, grinding, is antithetical to what this game asks of you when the proper time comes. This may just be where the magic returns. It's similar to making new memories. The majority of your memories aren't the mundane, but outlier experiences, and the same is certainly true in games. As a game developer, I'd imagine that subverting expectations competently is hard, but well worth the effort. We often talk on this channel about how Breath of the Wild's core tenet is telling you no as infrequently as possible. I recently watched a video by Limcube, a Breath of the Wild speedrunner, who completed a single shrine in 40 unique ways. In prior Zelda games, even 2 or 3 ways of completing a puzzle would be an achievement, but this is, of course, a much closer analog to the real world. There's not just one way to solve a problem, but many, and this, I posit, contributes a great deal to something more than just breaking expectations, but rather creating a world that feels not constructed, but pre-existent. For this game specifically, this is reinforced to me by the plethora of stuff you still didn't know you could do in Breath of the Wild videos that are still coming out more than 5 years after the game's release. In many ways, the game isn't actively subverting expectations, but passively doing so. By that, I mean that Breath of the Wild isn't rash and in your face about its versatility, it really just lets you interact with challenges, obstacles, and world elements as you see fit, and the developers just created systems that are built to interact with each other so that most things you try will pay off in some way, but you have to go looking for them. And this brings me back to Pokemon, as it was the first game where I experienced magic of some variety. I mentioned at the top of the video that the second instigator for this idea was Pokemon Scarlet and Violet coming soon, and this is where that plays in. As a kid, the world of Pokemon felt like something I was exploring and truly discovering. Surely this has a lot to do with the fact that I was a kid, and stands to reason that kids playing Scarlet and Violet as their first game, or first Pokemon game, will experience the same wonder as I did. Maybe, I assume. But if there are games like Breath of the Wild, or Divinity Original Sin 2, or even smaller experiences like A Short Hike or Hollow Knight, that elicit a sense of magic and discovery, is it possible for the series that started it all to do the same for me as an adult? There is, of course, connective tissue between many games, and with Scarlet and Violet being the first truly open-world Pokemon games, it stands to reason that this could become the magical Pokemon experience again, because that was the switch needed for Zelda, right? Well, I don't know. While that was a huge piece of the puzzle for Zelda, there's a core element to Pokemon that's the key to its potential wonder. It's the Pokemon. Minimal effort was needed to convince me as a kid that my Squirtle was special. I probably nicknamed him, and I bet that was enough. I see the same now with my 1-year-old daughter and our dogs. To her, it's insane that she gets to touch these furry beasts without repercussions, I think. I can't read her mind. But the most minute interaction goes such a long way to bring her joy. Whereas I know that our very ungroomed Maltipoo and Golden Retriever would never hurt a fly, and I can roughhouse with them, pick them up, or pet them with no concern. My expectations of what they will do is also much broader than hers. I expect them to not use the bathroom in the house, go outside when I tell them to, and come when I ask them to come. But my daughter is just thrilled for them to exist. Like Likewise with Pokemon, they've continued existing, but as my expectations have grown, I'd argue that the depth of ways in which I can interact with them has not. I'll actually not go into this in a ton of detail because AJ's made a phenomenal video on this topic a couple of months ago that I'll link here. And this isn't, of course, the only way that Pokemon can feel magical again. It actually got much closer to that feeling than ever with Pokemon Legends Arceus. But just to take a single series and put it under the microscope, there is a way in which it could create a sense of wonder again, if only by continuing to challenge expectation, but in the right ways. I think it often does feel like games have lost their magic. And frankly, this is because a large majority of creative media isn't chasing originality or even prestige, but chasing success. This is much less true of the indie space and select bigger studios, but by and large, a lot of media cares more about refining than evolving. And in an economy, that's to be expected, and frankly is oftentimes rewarded. It's important to keep the lights on, and creativity involves risk. So in all things, games, music, movies, at times it might be hard to find, but the magic is still out there, I think. Hey, thanks for watching. For a little while, at least, we're gonna do a video premiere alongside every video, and during that, we'll pick someone who's subscribed and liked the previous video and left a comment, ideally in response to the video in some way, to win the giveaway, which we'll announce during the current video premiere. And if that person isn't in the premiere, we'll have to pick a different winner who is there and is subscribed. We'll have a $25 eShop card as the prize for 3 videos in a row, and then a game release as the prize for every 4th video. We'll put the details in writing in this video details as well, so subscribe and like the video and leave a comment. Then show up during the next premiere, which we'll schedule in advance if you want a chance to win. And lastly, if you want to help us keep making these videos, help support the fund for the giveaways to continue, and a bunch of other cool perks, support us on Patreon for as little as $2 a month, like these awesome people on screen. All right, see you next time. Peace and blessings.